The problems that people run into when I meet people who try to be vegan and it isn't working for them, there's usually a number of reasons why. They're not choosing the right food. You want to be a whole food, plant-based diet, and you can't do this on Oreo cookies, granola bars, and energy drinks. You got to really eat the real healthy food, folks. This will not turn you into a healthy person. Now, you may see this when you walk into the grocery store. As you walk by this, it may actually call your name. And I'm crunchy and chewy and delicious. Why don't you take a couple bags of me home? I've often heard it. They pronounce my last name correctly. It's remarkable. This is not food. As Michael Pollan says, this is certainly not whole or vital food. This is edible food-like substances in brightly colored packages and boxes. You do not want to eat edible food-like substances in brightly colored packages and boxes because it's full of free radicals and salt and sugar and things that will damage you. So what do? It's tempting. What do I do when I see this? I realize these are pleasure trap foods. As Dr. Goldhammer was telling you this morning, these are foods that stimulate your goody gland, release serotonin and dopamine in your brain, but they don't provide nutrition. They just tease your sensory circuitry and make you eat a lot of food that you shouldn't. They stimulate pleasure centers in the brain. They're pleasure trap foods. You don't want to eat them. So what do? What do I do is when I see these things and I'm at all tempted, I take out my 3-word magic wand, point it right at the display, and I say out loud, that's not food. And then I walk down the soap aisle so I don't have to look at the stuff. Another problem is that people don't absorb the nutrients they need. Consequently, they develop deficiencies of vitamins and minerals. We'll talk about these specifically. What am I talking about? Nutrient malabsorption. Oh, and by the way, on the video on my website, Thriving on a Plant-Based Diet, I'll talk about some of the traps that we fall into. I'll touch on them here. But I also talk about underweight vegans, overweight vegans, vegans who are cold all the time, vegans with splitting nails. So you can check this out on my website, Thriving on a Plant-Based Diet. Rules for thriving on a plant-based diet. You got to eat the frickin' food. You can't do this out, as I said, out of packages and boxes. You need real live soups and salads and greens and fruits and vegetables and foods that grew out of the ground. It's got to be fresh, got to be whole, it's got to be vital food, not processed to the greatest extent possible. It's got to look like this. Okay, you keep your belly full of this stuff, you're going to wind up lean and healthy with normal blood pressures and normal blood sugar. The pot belly will go away, your joints stop hurting, and you turn into a normal, healthy human being. This is the key to health. Now, I'm a vegan. This is what your body is meant to run on. We have the same digestive system that our gorilla and bonobo cousins have that are up in the trees, and this is what this lovely lawn digestive system runs so beautifully on. We want to eat food like it was growing in the garden. Okay, you want to eat potatoes, not potato chips. Okay? You want to eat corn, not corn chips. Eat food like it was growing in the garden. Food as grown, as Dr. Deal says. So, eat whole, unprocessed foods. You got to absorb the nutrients. What does that mean? Now, you've heard the saying, you are what you eat. It's not true. Truth is, scientifically, you are what you absorb. If those nutrients don't make it from the food across your intestinal membrane and into your bloodstream and delivered to your tissues, you might as well not have eaten it. Absorption is the key to thriving on this kind of food. So if that's the case, we have to realize that animal foods are real easy to bite and digest because they just have this soft, floppy membrane around them. Plant foods have this rigid cell wall. That's what makes plants plants, and it's made of cellulose, and we don't have enzymes to break down cellulose. Cellulose is what's used to make paper and 2x4s, and all the nutritional goodies that we want out of the carrot or out of the apple are all locked up in this chamber of cellulose. That's what makes plants plants. And in order to absorb the nutrients out of the plant foods, you got to break down those cell walls. How do you do that? Mother Nature gave us 32 of the best juicers on the planet, and the invitation is to use them. We really need to break down those cell walls, and that's what your grinding teeth are about. So this is high fiber food, folks. These fresh salads and soups, they are full of fiber. You've got to take the time to break that fiber up. So I tell people, put a forkful of salad in your mouth, put the bloody fork down, make salad puree in your mouth before you swallow it. Take an extra 5 seconds to really chew the food to a puree. You're going to absorb so much more food. Plus, that's when you taste it. You're going to enjoy it much better. If people don't have good dentition, then throw the soup in the blender. So, we do blended salads, blended soups all the time. Perfectly legitimate thing to do. And turn off the television and be with your food, okay? We've become a nation of mindless shovelers, and we just shovel this food in. And it's not good for digestion or for our gratitude. You can get more nutrition out of beans and peas, legumes, if you soak them overnight before you put them in the soup or before you put them in the stew. So soak them overnight, they start to sprout, it starts to pre-digest the sugars in there, makes the protein more available. The next morning, spill off the soaking water, rinse it a few times, and then put that in your soup pot. You're going to get a lot more nutrition out of everything. Certainly legumes, beans, peas, chickpeas, lentils, but also nuts, seeds, grains, as much as you can, soak them overnight. And when you make a soup, the minerals go out into the soup broth. So soups certainly have a role in a whole food plant-based diet. Especially if you're a woman of reproductive age, you're losing iron every month in the menstrual flow, you want to increase iron absorption. So squeezing some lemon juice, vitamin C increases iron absorption. So squeezing some lemon juice on your broccoli will increase the absorption of iron. You can absorb zinc better in the presence of garlic and onions. And zinc is a tough one sometimes for vegans to get. So sauteing your greens or cooking them with garlic and onions will increase the absorption of zinc and iron. And again, this is all on my video, Thriving on a Plant-Based Diet. When you cut cruciferous vegetables, let them sit on the counter for 5 to 10 minutes. Enzymes get activated that make nutrients, nitric oxide precursors more available for you. So take your time, slice up the broccoli or the kale, and then go start getting your soup ready, but let the veggies sit out for a little bit, and you'll be able to absorb more nitric oxide precursor. Iodine is an issue for vegans. As I mentioned yesterday, in the base of our neck, we've got this gland called the thyroid gland, and it puts out a hormone, thyroxine, that regulates how fast your cells burn energy. And it's a vital hormone, you need it. Here's a diagram of thyroxine, and these 4 purple balls are atoms of iodine. So every molecule of thyroxine has 4 atoms of iodine. So you need some iodine in your diet. The fish eaters get iodine because the ocean's full of it, and so the fish will have it, but we don't eat fish if you're a vegan, and I think we've been clear-cutting the ocean. We've strip-mined the ocean. We've used fishing up. You know, it's done. It's time to let the fish off the hook. You know, it's time to let the oceans heal. So if you're not eating fish, where are you going to get your iodine? Well, there are sea vegetables that pick up iodine, and one of them is wakame. You see that at the Japanese restaurant, and you soak it for a few hours or overnight and throw a gob of it into your soup or salad 3 times a week. You'll meet your iodine needs that way. Edamame, you see that in salads made with sea vegetables, and again, a gob of it soaked and thrown into your soup or salad 3 times a week will work nicely. Are you concerned about contamination of these sea vegetables? Go to the website. I like Maine Coast here, but go to their website and look for their nutritional analysis for contaminating minerals, etc. Dulse is another sea vegetable that has plenty of iodine, and again, a tablespoon or so 2 or 3 times a week will meet your iodine needs. Be very careful with kelp. There is so much iodine in kelp that if you take kelp tablets or eat leaves of it, you will flood your thyroid with too much iodine and really cause the hypothyroidism you're trying to prevent. That's why it comes in sprinkle bottles there, and just a couple of sprinkles a few times a week is plenty of kelp to put on your salad. Don't use too much of it. And don't use hijiki at all. It picks up arsenic from the ocean. Well, people say, well, how about sea salt? Comes from the sea. Sea's full of iodine. Got to have a lot of iodine in sea salt, right? Wrong, actually. There's not really much functional iodine in sea salt at all. Why not? That doesn't make sense. Well, it does if you remember some old high school chemistry. Remember this one, the periodic table of elements here? This column, this is the halogen column. Fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine, astatine. And they all share some common properties. One of which we all know of chlorine. When you go in the swimming pool, what do you smell coming off of it? You smell chlorine because chlorine evaporates. It's volatile. And in fact, all of the halogens, these are all volatile, and that means they evaporate into the air. Well, that includes iodine. It's a volatile halogen. So what does that mean? Well, how do you make sea salt? You take big vats of seawater, put them out in the hot sun and evaporate the water off to leave the sodium chloride behind. Well, with all this hot sun, guess what else evaporates from the seawater? The iodine. And for that reason, you're not going to find much iodine left in actual sea salt. And so for that reason, if you want to use sea salt, then you can use just a pinch of iodized sea salt. You want a sea salt where they've added the iodine back in, and you certainly can get iodized sea salt. And if you're going to be using sea salt for iodine source, make sure it's iodized.